So yeah, let's start the session. Today's session is all about best practices in flows. Like I'm not going to show you what flows, how to write the flow, like how you use the elements, but I will show you the what are the best practices in flows. Yeah. So is this for you? Yes. Like if you are an app builder or a developer, definitely it is for you. And also if you want to beat Naveen is like Kahoot quest, then it's definitely for you. So let's begin. Let's go with the flow. So, has everyone watched Money Heist here? Like, oh no, there are a lot of
Yes.
negative, but that is surprising. So everyone watched Money Heist, right? So what is the core of this heist? Like, if you watch the series, what is the core that drives this heist?
Uh,
Money.
professor drives everything right from beginning to ending. No,
Like the main thing is like planning. Like
Money.
enter into the heist, like before they enter into the bank, the entire plan, what happens, what might happen, and how they need to come out of that situation. Everything is on board, prepared by professor. Like everything has been planned before entering into the heist. So like similarly, while developing flows, when you get the requirements, the first thing you need to do is not to do is to go to setup and start flow and adding the elements. First, you need to plan like what needs to be done. Like, is there a better way to do it, or is this uh, can be done without using flows? Or sometimes there comes a requirement where they ask for a flow, but it can be done through a small formula field or roll-up summary field. So instead of jumping directly into the flow, we have to just check whether it can be done in a better way without using flows. Okay, if you are using flows, how better I can do? Like if you are a developer, you might be knowing that there will be some piece of code which you need to run again and again in the same class. So what you will be doing, like you will be creating a method and then you will be calling that method wherever it is needed. Similarly, in flows we have subflows. We can write that repeated logic in that subflow, and then we can call it from anywhere in that flow. So all these things can be done if you plan it before you build it. So like to build this, you can use lucid charts to design like how where the decision element should be and what kind of decision element you need and how can the output will be. So all these things you can do with lucid chart. Or there are many available design flows. Or if you are not familiar with designing, you can even draw a book and can like what needs to be done. And the best thing is like not to develop flow inside the production. First, develop in sandbox, test it in sandbox, and once it is working, then move it to production. So the planning part is done. Yeah.
So what will happen if we use flows? I mean, if we build flows in production org? Because I
Uh,
have seen some of us are using, building flows in production org.
directly in the production arc.
directly in
Yes.
production,
That's
like
not a good practice. Am I right, Naveen? It's not a good approach.
the data will be changing, right? So you don't know like how to revert it back. So it's better to test it in sandbox and then move it to production. You can change
Yeah,
it
because
production.
we
It's not like Apex, like you cannot change it there. You can change it, but it's best practice not to directly develop in production. So yeah. Again, same question. Like, do you remember this dialogue from this
yes,
movie?
yes.
Okay, you know, right? So I think Akansha doesn't know it. I hope she doesn't watch Telugu or Tamil movies. So there is a
No,
little,
no, I don't know.
yeah, there is a little translation for you. If you can see this. This is the dialogue, like,
Lion comes singular alone.
hello.
Rajiv, better you not to speak because Prashant is here.
So yeah, again, the point is not this thing. Next slide. This like you should not whenever a requirement comes, you should not start building a new flow for that particular requirement. Like previously, like in planning phase only, you should decide like the best practice is to create one record trigger flow or object per type. Per type, what I mean per type is like we have three types of events that can be done through flows. One is after save, one is before save, and another is before delete. So it's best practice to have one for after save, one for before save, and one for before delete. So what happens if we have multiple flows for an object is like the order of execution in which the flows runs is not, it will be random. Like for suppose you are using a data field which is also being set by different flow. Then if that flow changes the data, then the like output you are expecting might not come from the flow which you are building newly. So what you need to do is, it's best practice to write only one flow per type. But if the situation comes like you cannot create one flow per type, then what you can do is like Salesforce has recently introduced trigger order of flow. Like you can order in which you can order in which order the flow should run. Like you can give the numbers like this flow should run first, this flow should run second. You can order the flows, and in the same order flows will be running whenever the event happens, like before save or after save. But there is one more best practice while giving the numbering to the flows. Like you can give numbers from 1 to 2000. So if you start giving numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and after some time you get a new requirement to introduce a new flow, and then you have to change the ordering if needed of all the flows. So what is best practice is to give a gap between numbers like 10, 20, 30, 40, so that whenever a new flow comes, then if on need basis you can give the numbering in between. Like if you give 11 or 15 to the new coming flow, then it will be running after the one which was given number 10 and before the one which was given number 20, which satisfies the requirement for that. So this is one best practice for ordering, so that I can escape some questions.
Sridhar, can you repeat the trigger
Sorry?
Trigger order of flows? Can you repeat
Trigger
that?
ordering, okay. When you are creating a flow, when you save it, then it will show an option called trigger order. Then you can give the order to the flow. Like you can give whether this flow needs to be run first or second or later, whatever the number it is. You need to give that number here. If you are developing 3 flows and if you give number 1 here, and the third flow if you give number 2 and second flow if you give number 3, then it will run in the order you mentioned here, not the order you created.
Is this beta or is it on?
No, it is already here. Sorry?
That's what you
Okay, previously how flows used to run is based on the created date. When you create a flow, it will run on the created date. It checks the created date, whichever flow is developed first, it will run first. So later, Salesforce has introduced trigger ordering of flow. There is one more scenario. Okay, that I will explain in Kahoot later.
So there is a question for Kahoot. Okay.
Yes, but you should guess.
Naveen already starts scribbling all these things in his
Yeah.
notepad.
Sorry, Rupesh, is your question answered or you want some more clarity in it?
Yeah, Sridhar.
Okay. So the next one is like, do not write entry criteria in start element. Whenever you start building a record trigger flow, you will be showing a start element. There if you go, then you will select the object name and you will be giving the entry conditions, so that the records will be sorted. Which records need to be picked that by flow is decided by that entry condition. But this entry criteria has some limitations. Like you can't use lookup fields inside that entry conditions. Second thing is like prior values. In flows you can use record prior values, but in entry condition you cannot use them. Third one is like whenever you create a resource like a formula inside a flow, you cannot use that resource in this entry condition. These are all the limitations. Okay.
So this is only
You cannot
an
use
object.
Yeah.
And that is why you can't mention all this.
That is where you cannot mention this condition. You can, but what if there are restricted choices there. So what you can do is you can use a decision element immediately after the start element. In the decision element, you can use all these resources, like you can use prior values or lookup fields, and you can start building the flow from there. And if you use decision elements, one more thing is that you can decide the path of in which the flow takes. Like I will tell you an example. You have an account, and in that there is a pick list field. You want to run the flow whenever an account is created. When the pick list value is X, it should run the flow, and whenever the flow is updated, and if the value is updated from Y to X, the pick list value is updated from Y to X, then the flow needs to run. Like when the record is being created, the pick list value should be X, then the flow should run. Whenever the flow is getting updated, pick list value should not be X, but it should be changed to X. That's when the record needs to be picked by this record trigger flow. So ideally, if we use this entry condition in start element, we can think like we can use the isChange element there, and then if we write the condition like if the value of list value is there, then it will run. This works only for update statement. When the new record is being created, isChange will be false, so the record will not be picked by the flow. So in these scenarios, what you can do is you can use a decision element. In the decision element, Salesforce formulas has isNew functionality. So in that you can mention like isNew. If it is new, then you should whatever the action might be same, but you are adding additional condition so that it will also allow these new records to be included in this flow. In such scenarios, this will be helpful, and using it in entry criteria might not help in these scenarios. So it's always ideal and best practice to not use entry conditions in start element.
But in decision elements, can I access all the prior values of the record?
Yes,
Any record?
all the prior values before update.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can.
any field. There are no field restrictions.
This is the most important. Like we should not hard code data in flows. I think developers knows it. They won't hard code in Apex. Similarly, we should not hard code in flow. Because whenever if we are using, for suppose I will give an example, like if we are using country codes in the flow, and if we are hard coding the country codes inside the flow, and in future our company for which we have built the flow might have been changing their codes, country codes, then we need to come and change in all the flows. Similarly, if we use any IDs inside, IDs using hard coded IDs is not at all a best practice. But in case if you use any ID and if you are moving this flow to a higher R, that ID might not be present in that R. So in these scenarios, the flow will fail. So to avoid all these things, we can use custom metadata types. Or if you want to use any IDs, you can use get records. You can retrieve that record and you can use that ID there. So that even if it is moved to higher R's, there also it will be getting records based on the conditions, and it will be taking the ID of the record which is supposed to be big. That's one more best practice. Next one is invocable Apex. So like flows are doing many things, but not everything can be done with flows yet. We might see some huge updates in future, but as of now, there are few limitations. One single limitation I want to mention is like if you have a list of IDs, and if you want to query records whose IDs are present in that list, then you cannot use that list inside flow. There is no in operator to use inside flows. So in this scenario, what we can do is we can call Apex method from here. We can pass the IDs which we want to use, and in Apex we can query using SOQL and then return the results back to flow, so that flow can be using these return values. So to use a Apex method inside a flow, we need to use invocable method annotation before that method in the Apex. This is one best practice.
Sriram, one question here.
Yeah.
Can I call an external application method from flow? Like I want to contact some different application from Salesforce to some other application.
There is an option, but I am not completely. I read somewhere that you can call external objects, but let me check and get back to you regarding that.
Okay, sure.
I think there is one option, but I am not completely sure about that.
I have a question, Sriram.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll go back to this. You were saying, right? We cannot query a list of IDs if we have a list, right?
Yeah.
So why do we need that? I mean, in query we can use it, but in flows we can fetch the records, right?
Filtering the list based on the record IDs, I think, is not possible there. Is what he's trying to explain. Is what
Yeah, I did that, yes. But I am trying to get the correct example for you. Okay, I will tell this example later.
Okay, no.
So this is no DML in loops. Like as a developer, they never use DMLs inside the loops. But as a new app builder, so like if we use the DML inside a loop, then what happens is we will be getting DML exceptions. To avoid this, we should never use a DML inside a loop. But how to overcome this limitation is like we can use assignment variable, assignment element inside the flow. We will use that assignment element, and whatever value we need to update to that record, inside the loop we will update the value of that to this inside the assignment element. Then we will add this current record from that list from that loop into a list, separate list. And later, once the entire loop is done, after the last element is executed, we'll come out of that loop, and then we will update the newly created list, which has the updated record values, so that we can avoid these DML exceptions. We will take each individual record from that loop. We will update the value. If you want to update some field, we will update that field in assignment variable. We will assign the value to it. Then we will add this new record in this existing record in that single element, single record from that loop to a new list. And we will update the new list once the loop is done.
So it will be more than a collection.
Yeah, more. Yes, collection variable. It will be a collection variable. So this is how this is one more best practice to not use DML inside loops. This is decision element after every get records element. We'll be querying some records inside the flow, right? So sometimes we might not receive records back. Sometimes our conditions might be failing, and there are no records which meet that criteria, and then we will not be getting those records into the flow. But later, without checking whether we got that records or not, if we start using that get records list, I think if you have created any get record element, you know that all those retrieved records will be coming into a list. So if you start using that list later inside the flow, you will be getting exceptions, invalid exceptions. So to avoid such scenarios, whenever you have a get record element, put a decision element and check whether the list which was retrieved is null or not. If it is not null, we can use it. If it is null, we can handle it in a separate way. So that's how you need to use always a decision element after every get records element.
So you can avoid some DMLs.
Yes, DMLs as well as like null pointer exceptions. So the next thing. So handle errors with fault paths. Like again, money is reference. Like if you have known it, professor planned everything, but this guy came out of nowhere and messed up many things. So say similarly in flows, sometimes we feel we will be handling many things, but some unhandled exceptions will be coming, and we don't know how to like some weird message will be displayed to customer that this unhandled exception has something like that, and customer will be scared. So to handle such scenarios, we need to use fault paths here. So fault path this is like whenever there is a failure in particular element, most probably the failures will be in the DMS or get record elements. So whenever there is a fault path assigned to that particular element, then if it is a screen flow, we can design a screen showing like, okay, this error has happened. We will respond back to something like that in that screen, and we can assign it to that fault path. If it is a record triggered flow, what we can do is generally if a record triggered flow fails, then the person running the flow or the person who owns the flow will be getting an error message. Instead of that, there will be other developers who will be working on these flows. So we can send a message, error message like this fault record at this time, customized error message to a group of people, so that they will look into it and they can resolve it and push the new latest version to the flow. So adding a fault path to a potential error element is always an ideal practice.
Shriram,
Yeah.
you gonna give any demo on this after this explanation?
No, I'm not showing anything.
Okay.
But I can share references where you can go and look into, so that it will be easy for you. Or
Yes.
if you have any doubts, you can ping me personally.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, here you can find there is a fault element attached to that get records element. And here I want to ask just a question, like sometime back I have explained one best practice and I missed it in this slide to add. So if you can identify it, it's fine. Yeah. Thing is that like after getting the records, I haven't added any null pointer check for this. So
Decision.
So that is one thing I realized after preparing this PPT, and I thought some people will question me. So before that, I am only asking you a question. So the next one is document your flows always. Like for suppose if someone asks me, like Prashant will be asking me every time like what you did in this flow, and I would have already forgotten what I did there. So it's always a best practice to document your flow, like what does flow does, what your flow does, and what are the things you are using in that flow. Like all these things you can be documenting it. And the another best practice is to name. Okay, I will tell that later. So that it, like documenting is always the best practice, whatever the flow may be, either it is small one or.
One question on this documenting the flow. Do we have an option on Salesforce itself where you can place a note for all this what you have done? Like at a step level, can you write something about?
At a step level, you can use the description box inside that element where you can write what that element is getting. If it is a DML statement, you can write what are the records it is expecting or what are the, and if it is a decision element, you can clearly mention what the decision is, like what you are, which path you want to take, and you can name the path correctly. Like, okay, this happened, so I am taking this path. You can be as detailed as possible so that even if it is not documented, later if someone comes and opens it, it will be easy for them to, yeah. Next one is naming conventions and meaningful naming of elements. Meaningful naming of elements, just now I mentioned to Srini, like if you can see this slide, like in get records, I am writing it as get all related contacts. Instead of get records, if I write get all related contacts, then even without opening, I know that I am getting the related contacts here. And if you see the email alert element, I am writing it send error message to developers. Instead of just writing email alert, if you write that, okay, this is sending the email alerts to developers, you can be as detailed as possible, and you can, so the flow looks better. Like whenever some other person comes and checks it, then they will know the idea without going into each element, opening it, and identifying what it is doing. So that is about naming conventions and meaningful naming of elements. So this is just an example, like how to name the flow. Like we need to mention whether it is a record triggered flow. It will be mentioned like auto launched flow. If you see the list of flows available, then it will show you auto launch flows. There are different types of auto launch flows. One might be scheduled flow, or one might be a sub flow. All these will be coming under auto launch flows. But in the naming, if you mention like record trigger, account after save, something like that, then you know that okay, this is a record triggered flow and it is running after the account. And even in description, you can mention like if you are, this is just a one-line description like update related contacts of an account after the account is updated. But if you are using the flow for some other purpose, you can add it here in the next step. Like okay, this flow does this as well apart from this. So it can be as descriptive as I said, like as descriptive as much. Next one is deployment. So this is something which came up yesterday, like when discussing with Roshan and Prashant. Like whenever you deploy an already existing flow which is active in production from a sandbox, then the latest version will not be automatically activated inside the production. We need to go and manually activate that in production. Sometimes we think like we deployed flow correctly, but the issue is not resolved. So it might be due to the latest version is not being activated in the production or any other higher ups. So please make sure that whenever you deploy an already existing flow, go there and activate the existing, latest version. Yeah, this is the summary for this session. Okay, so like today what we discussed mainly like best practices, like to plan the flow before you build, and like where to use the conditions, like inside the entry criteria or outside the entry criteria. Not too hard elements. You can call Apex from flows, so you can use that as an Apex option as well. And no DMLs inside the loops. Then decision element of every get record element, so that we can avoid null pointer exceptions. To use fault paths, which is a best practice to not avoid some unhandled exceptions. Then always documenting your flows so that it will be easily understandable to someone else who will be working later. The naming convention will also fall into the same category, but documenting is always better to know the interfunction. Yeah, these are the differences. You can go to these differences. You might find some points copied from here. So If you want any detailed description, then you can go there and read them. And there is one YouTube series by Apex Arts. You can go. It is very descriptive. If you can spend 1 weekend going through these videos, then I think you will be good in flows, and you need to practice as well. Yeah. So never stop learning. This ends my session.
Questions?
Yeah. Any questions?
Only one question, Sriram, Naresh here.
Yeah. Man.
Naresh, sorry, let's say I have two objects, Sriram, object
Okay.
A and object B.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a flow in object B,
Okay.
but I don't have permissions on object B.
You don't have permissions in
Object B.
object B.
Yeah, but in my Apex class, I'm writing some insert statement on object B.
Okay.
So how can I avoid, like, what is the test case here? Like, what is the use case will come up here?
Okay. You don't have permission on entire object or some particular
Entire object. I don't have anything. Even I can't read the object as well.
Okay.
But when I say insert object B, automatically the trigger will.
Record trigger flows mostly run in a system context. So I think permissions won't come into picture at that time.
So it won't care the permissions of the.
Record trigger flows will run in system context. If you are using any screen flows, they will run in the user context. At that time, you need to see how it needs to be done. I'm not sure about the entire object, but if some fields are inaccessible, then we can in setup. There is one option where you can check it. Where if we face any inaccessible fields, it will skip them instead of throwing an error. It will not retrieve that particular field, but it will move it to next field. Like it will skip that particular field. But entire object in user context, I am not.
So yeah, okay, got it. So if you can't use that, is accessible or is readable or is readable. So
As of now, they are not available. I think Salesforce will introduce them in near future.
Okay.
What is that one valid scenario apart from one selection where I should absolutely not do it flow? Even if I can't do flow, just sleep over trigger. Is there an example that we have? Because I see you can access before values. You can pretty much do all the operations that is taking care of. Record trigger is taking care of the delete part.
After delete, we cannot do with flows. We need to go to triggers.
Yeah.
That is one thing.
But that's not yeah.
Yeah.
It's very rarely used. After delete is not a commonly used trigger. So, but still before delete is there, so that comes into picture.
Yeah. Maybe sending integration part, like if you want to integrate some of the data.
Callouts.
Yeah, callouts.
Are you saying you cannot make callout to this? Can you not make callouts using flows?
I am not completely sure, but as far as I know,
Somebody there.
yeah. Does someone know if we can make callouts from flows?
I'm not sure.
No. Even I am not.
Last time we discussed, I guess. Last
Sorry?
time Bala has given some answer to this question.
What is the answer, Hari?
I mean, he said we should call Apex class, and in the Apex class you need to respond.
Okay,
From flow you need to call Apex and then we do.
From flow is called invocable.
Yeah.
And from invocable Apex you can make a call. Is what you're saying.
It's what?
That's the
More there's a limitation on in the flow context if there's a call out system will stop, or I can't make a call out from an Apex. That's what the question is.
I'm not completely sure. I need to check
and is there any time limit for that flow? Like,
Sorry?
once the flow is start doing the transaction, is there any time limit for that flow? Like 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, maximum limit of that flow to execute right from beginning to ending.
Maximum time limit. These are I'm not sure like how much time limit it will be. This will also help.
What is the question?
Like how much time limit will it take the flow to run?
Because we are more concentrated on the performance also, right? So that's why I'm asking.
That is sure article. I think there is a CPU time of 10 seconds
Okay.
for any transaction.
Okay.
Whether it is Apex, flows, process builder, inclusive of the entire order of execution. So you send one order of execution screenshot in the morning.
Okay.
So the entire But one single transaction has a limit of whatever that 10 second. I think the limit is 10 seconds. Where the time occurs. And I don't think there is any time limit for validation rules or flows or limits as such. It's for given transaction, any transaction.
Okay.
These are my understanding.
So one last question.
Yeah.
So we have like if we upset the record multiple times, like recursive in the trigger, at max it will reach 15 times, 16 times, right? In the flow also, is that the maximum limit, or is
I didn't get your question. Can you please come again?
for example, I'm updating one record
Okay.
on account. In the trigger, I have written like upset statement or an upset statement.
Okay.
Again, call the same trigger, right? Whenever I call the upset statement,
Yes.
it's again called. It's after insert. Again, it's called after insert. Again, it's
Yes.
called after insert. Like that, in the Salesforce, we have at max 16 times, 16 recursive you can do it. After you reach the maximum limit.
Oh, okay.
Similarly, is there any these kind of limitations for the flow as well?
Even I'm not sure about this, but I will check this again and I will answer your question later.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm starting.
Yes. Only I'm the person who answered first. One more guy, two more.
No, there is one right. Why I put this is because we need to think logically to run flows. So
How is it that is timed down and it says you have the board?
Next question, please.
Only two people answer.
see Naresh wrong. Next question.
Multi-cell.
I selected both of them.
I think you might have forgot to click it. Next question.
You got it wrong. Strange. Yes, okay, wait. Next, we'll have to talk about it. Next time, when you see that, also talk about the answer. Like, talk about the previous one, where you say
Interview.
why you went, but most people got it wrong.
Interview debug చేసినప్పుడు నరేష్ sorry debug when you are debugging it will give you as interview started, right?
Oh, right. I mean, instance of a flow is called. Okay.
Yeah, this question, I guess, in last time when Rupesh explained, he was specifically mentioning that it will be called interview. So I thought you will be remembering. And coming back to previous question, like I said, like before delete event, right? So before delete cannot be performed through process builders and workflows. It can be done through flows and Apex triggers. So those are the answers for that. Next question.
Correct order of execution.
And I can see this.
Oh, wrong again.
Options are too big to read here and you get only some time.
Close.
Yeah.
Before say first or before
No,
Yeah.
flows run after triggers, right?
after triggers flows, right?
Sorry?
After triggers flows, right?
No, first flows will run, then triggers. If you see the latest order of execution in Salesforce documentation, you can find that.
I just now forwarded in altokk. Just wait. I'll check.
Okay.
I thought before save flows, after the custom validations
No.
will come.
Execute before save flows.
No, custom validation, Raj, okay.
Yeah, Shiran is right.
Okay, before was the answer right there in one second. Triggers always.
Isn't it custom validations first, Sriram?
No, Raj, I'm not sure it is required, not required. If you remember, Raj, if you remember, we did one validation, right?
Yeah.
Before flows. So it does mean that flows run before the validation rules.
Yes, flows after the custom validations, right? Before triggers, okay.
Naresh posted in our general.
I posted in the WhatsApp group, Roshan, actually.
I posted in general as well. Please, people mark it, save it, whatever. That's very important.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thanks. Move on. Only Sushma wanted to get. Somebody else also wanted to get,
Oh, next question. English.
Are you clear about
Was multi-select? Was that a multi-select there? Oh,
Yes, it is a multi-select.
I selected only one and I didn't submit also.
That's your problem.
Yeah.
But it got right. I got it right.
Okay.
But you submitted.
Are you on the podium?
Yes.
Okay. Track yourself. Kolkata boy.
Are there any points for this?
No points. One set.
Who is that? Who is that one?
We'll find out.
Okay.
Save.
4 more.
Multi-select double points.
Full points. Multiple answer. I was late.
Okay.
I was late. I was late.
Bye.
So
Rupesh, what? You came down, Rupesh?
Can we call a flow from Apex?
yeah, we can call flow from an Apex.
Shiram,
I think yes.
we
A
can
day
call
before I
from
called,
workflow
I
as
asked
well, right? No?
Sorry,
We can call from workflow as well, right? No.
flow you cannot call from workflow.
No, not possible.
Yeah. Only from
We
process.
can't
flows.
even call a process, I guess.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's saying for me, Rupesh, you're in 4th place behind Rupesh. No, so you're in 3rd place.
With one answer, I get lost.
I kept all right this.
In which context?
You mentioned this, I think, Sriram, right?
But still one more point.
Still 1%.
My position is not changing, though I'm giving the right answers.
There's a bug in Kahoot.
Hey, how can we expect that?
Like,
Do you have points for this?
yes, of course.
General knowledge.
Sriram, if you have points for this, I will.
Points.
Okay.
Tanindi. I lost.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
I have spelling mistake.
Zing zing.
Only Prashant came up. Nothing else.
But why points for that question?
There are two after save and two before save flows on object with the same trigger order value in which order they will run.
Again, we have to read all this. Okay, choose one. Green. Then alphabetical order. Number is there, right? No number.
Number is there, but same number. You are given same number. You can give same number. If you give same number, what will happen?
Okay.
Hit right with
Like you can give same number to flows, but what happens is if the same number is given, then they will take the alphabetical order and it will run in the same manner.
Oh, that's what I didn't know. I chose that.
Finally, I'm at 9th place.
Then
I am on podium. I don't know where. Okay, third place.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
6 out of 10. Oh my god. Okay.
5 out of 10. But time matters.
back to back.
Yeah.
Time and multiple selections also there, right?
I can screenshot. I'll send it to you.